Welcome back to MTMM Radio. This is episode 7, I believe. Today we're going to talk a little bit about just some easy things that you can do, some takeaways that you can do to improve your health and performance today. So what can you do today? What changes can you start implementing right now? Some easy, simple things that will change your life, make you feel a lot better, and you don't need to overhaul your life in order to make some small improvements. So the first one, I think that is super easy and not many people take advantage of how easy this one is to drink more water.
Done. Let's move on. Like, it's as simple as that, right? Yeah. Honestly, it's as easy as having a plastic bottle on your desk and having a sip every time you look at it, you know? Plus the performance benefits mentally and physically that you get from drinking more water. Why wouldn't you? You know, why would you look to do anything more if you didn't need to in regards to anything that you do, right? And water is essentially, like you said, the easiest one to do. In terms of how much people generally spend within the industry on detoxification, as a supplement, as a snake oil, as a tea, as a pill, as a powder, your body wants to detox in a natural state of detox at all times. It's as simple as making sure you drink enough water to continue to flush things through the system. Right. This is definitely a starting point for all of my clients. I think over the past 3 years, during initials, I think 3 people have been consuming what I would consider an adequate amount of fluid. And I know even for myself, if I don't have a water bottle on me, if I don't have an empty shaker, a bottle around that I can fill up with water, you get to the end of the day and you realize I've had nothing to drink all day.
Yeah,
right?
It's so easy to
Yeah. So I think, you know, not only drink more water, but drink more water earlier in the day. Again, we've kind of talked a lot about the importance of sleep and recovery. So what we want to avoid with drinking more water is obviously like having to get up in the middle of the night when we are asleep to go to the bathroom. So drink more water, but drink more water earlier in the day. All right. And if you're starting with beginning to eat more regularly, eat breakfast, get up, wash down your fish oil, wash down your vitamin D with like a full shaker of water. You've been up for 10 minutes, you already got 500, 600 mils on the board, okay? In terms of how much, obviously it's gonna be affected by, you know, your personal size, your activity level, the weather. Obviously, if it's hot, we want you to be drinking more. But I think for most women, 1.5 liters to 2 liters is a pretty good place to start, and for guys kind of close to that 2.5, 3 liter amount. And the thing to keep in mind is I would say anything that you drink while training or while being active does not count towards that overall goal, because you're not really hydrating, you're just replenishing, right?
And I think too, some ways that can make it a little bit easier to get the water in is to flavor your water. I like to add lemon to mine. Sometimes I put frozen berries in. I also have BCAAs, and the primary reason I take BCAAs is to flavor my water, so I drink more water. I have a greens powder for the same reason. And I just make it part of my routine every morning. I don't leave the house until I have a big mason jar. I think it's about 1 liter of water in me. I just don't let myself leave the house, and it's become very habitual, and I just don't feel like myself if I don't have that before I leave the door.
Yeah. So, I mean, Kat loves drinking tea, right? So that's been her go-to is some peppermint tea or some green tea, keep the caffeination quite low. For the coffee lovers out there, it's not an excuse to be drinking 2 liters of coffee every day in order to hit your water, particularly if you're not usually a big coffee drinker. It'll actually, the additional coffees can actually dehydrate you even further, right? So, but yeah, I think, well, we've managed to talk for like 10 minutes on like the first topic. Fantastic. True to form. But yeah, drink more water early in the day. And if you have to flavor it to make it a little bit easier to get down, go for it.
Yeah. And start small. Like if you're only having 0.5 liter right now, start with 1 liter and aim for that, and then build on it from there. If you try to go directly into that 2 liter goal, it's going to feel really difficult. It's going to feel unachievable, and you'll probably be demotivated and won't continue that. So just start small, build yourself up, and eventually you'll get there.
Perfect. Easy. Done. 1 in the bank.
Number 2, eat more protein.
Yeah. Probably our favorite one. right? Again, like if you think water is deficient within most people generally during the community, protein even more so. Okay, so I think definitely when you're starting with protein, before you need to get into weighing out and calculating how many grams and how much you should be getting in with each meal and spreading it evenly over the course of the day, etc., etc. I think it's enough to really start by understanding some really good sources of protein and making sure that there is one present with each meal or snack that you're eating. If you are doing that, if you're having 3 meals a day and a snack and they've all got a decent serve of protein, you're going to be much further on your way to meeting your protein target, an adequate amount of protein target, particularly if you're active, than you are otherwise. Okay. This one is particularly important as we see a lot more, not just within our client community, but a lot more people in general begin to adopt a plant-based lifestyle. What we can typically see there is, okay, I've decided I'm going to cut meat and meat product, but there's no replacement of that protein, right? So essentially we just completely cut one macronutrient, cut our calories through the floor, and we don't look to properly replace them. So that's something that we really need to be aware of. But most people generally, whether they're omnivores or carnivores or carnivores, aren't getting enough protein, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think similarly to what you were saying, how there's no need to weigh and measure everything out if you're just starting out. Just make sure that you're getting in those 3 to 4 identifiable sources of protein in your day. I think that that's something that's also good to apply when you're traveling or you're out of your routine. And if it's not feasible for you to stick 100% to program, focusing on getting in those sources of protein will put you miles ahead of where you would be if you just said, screw everything, right? So I think it should always be a main focus, whether you're 100% on program or you're kind of being a little bit more flexible, always having that protein in the back of mind.
Yeah, I think, look, we're not massive on supplementation, but I think for most people, if you are struggling to get enough protein in, you don't need a protein supplement, but it certainly can help in a lot of situations. If you're not a big eater, or you don't really like to eat a lot of meat, or you find yourself quite time poor, or like you said, traveling, whey protein powder is cheap. It's really accessible. You can take it with you in a bag through customs, like all the rest of it. It's not going to be hard to get in and bang. Like for some people, that's 25% or 30% of their protein requirements sort of on the head already done.
Mm-hmm. But keep it supplementary, and we'd say maybe
and not substituted for.
Yeah, maximum 2 a day, and not making that a regular thing.
Yeah. All right.
Number 3.
Speaking of plant-based eaters, all right. I think not that we necessarily advocate one way or another, but I think that everyone could benefit from eating more vegetables.
Yes.
Okay. So I know for me personally, when I'm kind of figuring out how to make all my carbohydrates fit for the day, if I'm not putting my veggies in, I'm not thinking about them, right? Most people, when left their own devices with a carbohydrate goal, will use rice, sweet potato, pastas, breads, grains, all the good stuff. And then it's like, oh, I don't have any space left for like my broccoli and my zucchini and stuff like that, right? So I think just like we're saying with every meal that you should have an identifiable source of protein, you should have some sort of plant matter in there as well. Okay. And again, if this is the stage where you're at in your journey where you're just trying to get the basics right, don't worry about starchy carbs versus incidental carbs versus grains. Just work to get in more plant matter with each of those meals. Throw some spinach and some mushrooms and some peppers in when you're sauteing in a pan to have with your eggs and your egg whites for breakfast, right? Big leafy green salads, stir-fry veggies. Like, you can't really go wrong. Just get some more in.
Yeah. And I think that if you're avoiding your vegetables because you want to prioritize the rice and the sweet potato when you're counting your carbohydrates, I would say knock your carbohydrate goal down like 15, 20 grams and just say that vegetables are freebies, and you'll start filling your plate up with tons and tons of vegetables, right?
Yeah, and that certainly comes along, when you do increase that sort of nutritional literacy, and you understand, how incidental the amount of carbohydrates that you get from vegetables is going to be. You are not going to be putting on weight because you're overdoing the broccoli, the zucchini, the capsicum, the mushrooms, right? You're going to get a sore jaw, right? You're going to be feeling overly full if you're really going hard on them, but you're not going to overdo your caloric consumption or your carbohydrate consumption based on your plant eating, right? Plant-based eating.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people find it difficult when they live alone or they're only cooking for themselves, maybe one other person, to get a variety of vegetables in. Getting a variety of different colors and different types of vegetables is important as well. But I would say that if you can only stick to a couple different types of vegetables over the course of the week, then switch it up the next week. And just every time you go to the grocery store, grab a different type of vegetable. But it doesn't mean that each day you need to be getting in 5 different types of vegetables. Ideally, but
Yeah.
not work well that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good way of getting a really good micronutrient array, like you said. Obviously, like different colors are really good indicators of different micronutrients. And so that is just the simplest way, like you said. Sometimes get the yellow capsicum, sometimes get the green, sometimes get the red, sometimes get the purple cabbage, sometimes try the purple carrot, like whatever it is, just get some sort of plant-based matter on each one of your plates.
Yeah. And I recently started getting frozen vegetables, especially cauliflower is really good for all these cauliflower recipes that we have out. Just take it out of the freezer and steam it. It's not going to go bad in the freezer. And it's super easy to prepare. And say you're going on vacation or something like that, and you come back and you're a bit thrown back into it and you're like, well, I don't have any vegetables. Well, just open your freezer and you've got some waiting for you.
Yeah, rotisserie chicken and frozen vegetables. Like
yeah.
when you're in a bind, it's still going to be 10 times better than most of the other stuff you're going to be able to get your hands on, right? So keep it simple.
Yeah. And I guess kind of on the same note there, number 4 in terms of things that you can do to improve your health today would be to cut the crap.
Yeah. So if you have zero nutritional knowledge, you still know what is and isn't good for you primarily. Like you've got a pretty decent understanding that like the junk food, the crap, the high processed stuff, all the sugar, it's not the best for you. How do you know that? Well, mostly probably because it makes you feel like crap the more that you eat it, right? So if you as an individual understand that you have a very limited, knowledge when it comes to nutrition, and you think something or something is bad, don't do it. Or keep it to a minimum, really, is probably a more realistic expectation. But if you are serious about trying to make some positive change in terms of your diet, your body composition, your health, it's the easiest place to start, right? And the easiest way to do it is don't buy the crap in the first place. So it can't be sitting in your cupboards, call your name at 10, 11 o'clock at night when you've had an average day, a hard day, just feel like something sweet. If there's nothing there, there's a battle you don't have to fight, right? And if you decide you really want something bad enough to leave the house at 11 o'clock and go and get it, well, okay, that's going to be a real one-off. And if you're doing that every night, then we've got some other issues that we need to be discussing, right? Yeah, and I think as well, we work pretty hard to kind of move away from this idea that if you're on program, that means you can't have any of those things that you really enjoy eating. And I think that what we want to understand is that it's not about good foods and bad foods so much as it is about choosing more foods that align to your goals. But I know, even for myself personally, I love ice cream. I love ice cream. But I also know that if we always have a punnet in the freezer, I'm going to eat ice cream every night. And that doesn't, align and progress me further towards my goal. So we don't buy it, right? And that way, when I do want ice cream, we'll go for really good ice cream. We'll go to a Messina or an Ernest ice cream, right? Or a Rain and Shine. Have it, it's done. You kind of get your fix and you're good to go.
Right.
So much better than just pints and pints of Ben and Jerry's in the freezer.
Yeah. And I think you appreciate it a lot more too at that point.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Good quality, crappy food, you're going to feel a bit better than if you get the crappy version of the crappy food.
Yeah, it's one of those things too. The more time that we have people spend eating more foods that aligns to their goals, the more the idea of I can't live without pizza, or I just love Chinese food, or I need my ice cream and donuts. Well, once you realize actually how good you can feel when you're eating foods that do make you feel good, that temptation actually reduces a lot more over time. It's not necessarily it's giving up smoking where you kind of stop the habit completely and there's nothing to replace it. We're not telling you to eat less. In most cases, we're actually meaning by cutting the crap, you're going to need to eat more. But I think the feeling that you get after spending a couple of weeks of having a high consistency on program, that want to then go off and feel not so good is greatly diminished. And that eventually gets to a point where it's it's just not worth a cheat meal. You get to a point where the party isn't worth the hangover anymore.
Yeah. So. Yeah. All right. Number 5, quickly, which we touched on a little bit earlier as well, is to get more sleep.
Yeah. Again, the water, maybe not as simple, definitely, but still super basic and super underrated. So all that body composition change that you're after, all that laying down of lean muscle tissue, all that fluid shift, all that tapping into your fat stores, and really like getting those like feelings of leanness and recovery and mental reboost, all happens when we sleep. So if you are going to bed at 10 o'clock and you are watching Netflix for 3 hours, and then you are setting yourself an alarm to try to go to the gym at 5:30, 6 a.m. and you're running off 4 or 5 hours of sleep every day, like you're not going to be running at your best. Doesn't matter how much water you drink, doesn't matter how much protein you get in, how many veggies and how little processed foods. If you're not getting an adequate amount of sleep, you are like shooting yourself in the foot, right? I always have clients who, when they tell me like, yeah, I only need 4 to 5 hours and I feel great, my response is, well, then you're going to love how you feel after 7 or 8 hours. Okay?
Yeah.
I think the biggest kind of insight into how important sleep is when you look at a lot of the research being done on shift workers, when you look at a lot of the shift being done on on the sleep deprived, and what that kind of effect can have on blood tests and appetite and mood and body composition. Go to bed earlier, try to sleep longer. Yes, okay, every night might not be perfect. You might only get 5 or 6 hours one night. Things are busy, you're stressed, you can't sleep, whatever it is. Again, just like when we talk about consistency over perfection with your diet, if we can do the same with your sleep and have you getting more of those 7 hours and less of those 4 or 5s, you're going to do better overall. A lot of what we're kind of seeing and understanding and reading is telling us that the best way to restart your sleep cycle, if you are in really bad habits when it comes to sleep, is don't get too focused on amending what time you're trying to go to bed and trying to, like lie there and like force yourself to sleep like 2 hours before you would normally go to bed, but set a consistent time to get up each morning. Now that might be really tough in the beginning if you're used to going to bed at 12 or 1 or 2 a.m. and then forcing yourself to get up at 6 a.m. But after a few days, getting up is going to get easier. You're going to be getting more tired earlier, and that's how we restart the sleep cycle.
That's interesting. I never actually looked at it that way.
Yeah. Sleep hygiene is huge. That'd be another podcast in itself. But we talk about, it is quite hard to force yourself to sleep instantly, especially if there are a lot of stress factors going on, if there's a lot of stimulation, a lot of blue light on your phone, or, you're watching a really intense drama on Netflix and it's really exciting and you keep kind of flicking into one more episode, or, if you're stressed with things at work, if you've got family stress, it can be hard to turn that off and get to sleep. But working towards getting up at the same time, which is something you can control. Again, if we focus on controlling the controllables, getting up at the same time and getting on with it despite the lack of sleep, and not, hitting snooze. I didn't sleep very well, I'm not going to get up this morning. That's kind of how you get things started on that end.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Right. Yeah, I forgot to set a timer this time, but I feel like we're reaching that 10-minute mark.
Yeah, I feel like, right on 10 minutes, Max.
Nailed it. So we'll wrap it up there.
Perfect. And again, as always, if anyone has any other tips that they think have been, really good for them and really simple to implement and have had a huge impact, we'd love to hear about them. Leave them in the comments, chat to coaches, let us know so we can share it with everyone else.
Yeah, sounds good.
Perfect.
All right.
All right.
Next week.
Thanks, Mags.
Bye.